So thanks everyone for joining our podcast here on 30 Minutes with the Hacker. We've got a number of engineers or hackers in the room here with me and also remote. We have John Garner and Brett Scott, Josh Harp, Marshall Hall, as well as the managing partner for Turner Technology out of Omaha, Nebraska, Gary Bren, who has a solid security practices and one of our partners here with Tech Data. So the topic that we are going to discuss is around how do you consult with your companies? How do you get them to make the right decisions around security, to make the right purchases? How do you communicate with them to drive the right behavior? And this is going to get into a technology versus business outcomes conversation. But to kick this off, I'm going to let Gary kind of set the stage for what he's seeing out there in the marketplace as he's talking to customers and the challenge that he's running up against. So Gary, I'm going to kick it over to you first.
Thanks, Jade. We deal primarily with small to medium-sized business clients, and quite frequently those clients don't really have anyone that's technical or IT-oriented on staff, and we actually fill that role for them. And the challenge that we see all the time is that there's a lot of fear and uncertainty. Media, people hear about crashes, they hear about hack attempts, hack events, and business damage for that, but they don't have a context to be able to relate that to what their real risk is. And you can scare people and you can get them to do things, but I think the bigger value, and we see this in our conversations, is actually getting them to understand what their real risk really is. Most small business clients that we run into don't really understand the value of the information in their systems. They've never really objectively thought about that. They have some sense of it'd be bad if I lost this, but they don't know how bad it really would be if they lost it. And when they hear these things, events in the media and problems going on with companies and hack events, they hear it, but in some level it's abstract, it's fear, but it's not connected to the reality they live in. And so I think the most important thing that we try to do for our clients is to try to get them to understand really in a concrete way the value of the data that drives their business. And I think that's really the starting point for me for this conversation is do people really understand what's at risk? Because there's a lot to be scared of. There's a lot to be scared of, and there's a lot of things that are threats today. But I think they need context to understand what that is.
Makes sense. So Gary, and I'll let you guys kind of jump in here. When what I've seen in the marketplace a lot of times is the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt approach, and a lot of times what we see with customers, your biggest competitor a lot of times is no decision, just getting them to move and get off of what they're doing with the status quo to see maybe the challenge that they're up against. So there's people that approach the FUD angle and seem to have success with it. I know that you're approaching it a little bit different. So maybe weave in kind of how you use FUD, because we do need to move people off the dime a lot of times. How does that tie in with what your approach is? Well,
so a business doesn't know, for example, they haven't really thought it through. They don't know that they can afford to be down for more than a few hours, or they don't realize that they literally have the value of their business sitting in the system. They've never objectively thought that through. And so there's no FUD that's more effective than FUD that has a connection to a tangible, palpable reality that puts a measure to what that FUD really costs. It's one thing to have FUD that they've heard about a business that was jeopardized because they had a hack, but that's abstract. That's not their personal reality. That's somebody else's reality, and they're wondering, how does that reality affect me? But they don't really objectively know what that real fear is and how it's going to play out. So if they understand that, well, gee golly, if your system goes away, you're out of business maybe, or you're going to lose this amount of revenue, or you're going to have these kinds of problems, and they really objectively think those things through, it actually amplifies the FUD to a greater extent, because now it's not just some generalized fear that someone else went through. It's a real actual fear and threat to what they're doing, and they can actually put a business value to being able to make that decision to say, yeah, I should go spend $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever number of dollars to be able to make this change, because now I understand what the risk is in an objective way. Fear backed by objective reality is the most effective fear, I think.
And I think when you put it in that frame of mind, I think you move away from what is at the crux of FUD, because you're now taking you're applying realism into the whole conversation, in that you're looking at the business's objectives, outcomes, goals, desires, strategies, what have you, and you're saying you're honestly having a conversation of what have you evaluated as your top 5 risk concerns. 5 is an arbitrary number. You could just say, what are your risk concerns? And then from there, move into the conversation of understanding those are your risk concerns. What are your risk tolerances to that? And then move toward, well, now what kind of technologies or procedures or processes or maybe even people can you put into place to alleviate some of the potential business impact, where if one of those risk concerns were to become a reality, right? So the method is you're putting FUD in a way on its own head, and then you dance around the pin needle, because you're not truly doing it. You're saying all of what is behind FUD is real, and here is how it is real to you. So you move the uncertainty and doubt pieces, and you just truly address the realism of fear.
So on that,
Yeah.
if you're having trouble, if you're a business owner and you're having difficulty, like what do I do now? What's the next move I make? This is essentially, you have 2 entry points. The first one, and the most common one, is going to be assessments. You need an expert who understands cybersecurity to come look at what you've got, assess what your capabilities are, and then to give you guidance on what you should be doing next. And similarly, that is dependent upon your ability to see. So what I mean by that is, if you don't know where your data is, you don't know where your technologies are, you don't know what the risks are, and nothing says when you're under attack or anything else like that, you are essentially have impaired vision. There could be a whole war going on outside your house, but you don't see it or hear it, and that's a problem. Big businesses, they hire people like business analysts who will go through and they will look at these things and conduct all those things. Most small businesses can't afford that. So if you're a small business owner and says, look, I can't keep paying for assessments because I've just spent the money that I would use for a solution, and now I can't do anything. And I would argue that that same risk applies to your ability to see. Like if you're in a SOC, John here will tell you, it doesn't matter if you have really capable people looking at your network. If there's not stuff on the network helping them to see what is under attack, it doesn't really matter that they're there to not observe it. So you have 2 different components as a small business. You need to improve your ability to see what's going on, and then you also need to have someone who is an expert in cybersecurity to help you to understand what is working well for you and what is working poorly.
Yeah, it comes down to a combination of technology and people, and finding that right balance, because visibility costs money. You need to figure out what you need to see, or prioritize what you need to see so that the people can act on that information appropriately.
And that will likely be led by a cybersecurity professional, someone who knows more than you, the business owner, does. So assessments typically are the go-to move for most businesses. If you say, I'm not exactly sure what to do next, then the answer is absolutely get an assessment. And obviously you want to hire the right people to do that. But again, the assessment will help you to gain insight into what should I be looking at, what should I have visibility on, and what should I be protecting in my company.
And I think we also then address in that conversation has to be a collaboration between the business owners and then the subject matter experts in cybersecurity, right? Because the business owner themselves is going to know the ins and outs of their business, hopefully. That's why they're a business owner. Yeah.
and then the security professionals are hopefully going to know their own industry as well, right? So you have a little bit of a kind of play and interchange there, because we know in some cases business owners don't truly know, and then even though they're called security professionals, they're still crawling in diapers and still need to have some form of exposure to the industry. And so what it ultimately becomes is, instead of having a feedback loop where everyone is just yes manning each other and say, yeah, that's the right thing to do, or yeah, that's the great thing to do, and oh, you need to do this as well, have a frank conversation about how would they get the most benefit moving forward if they were to take small steps to integrate different solutions or policies or technologies along the process to get it all worked out, right? It's not to say to get it down to a science, because things change over time and you have to be quickly agile or adaptable to the rate at which our industry changes. But again, it's that collaborative conversation where everyone's objectives, right? Because everyone's going to bring their own objectives to the table. The consultant's going to bring his objectives to the table. Internal IT, if they have it, is going to bring their objectives to the table. Business owners will bring their objectives to the table. And ultimately, what it all has to become is everyone's own objectives have to ultimately line up to what will benefit the organization themselves.
And that's ultimately the business owner's decision. But the business owner could take a page from how GPS works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So GPS signals, you have these satellites in orbit. They are out broadcasting signals saying, I'm here and here's what time it is. And the way that your navigation in your vehicle works is it reads from those satellites and it says, okay, based on what I know here, that means I'm at this point in the map. But to use that GPS to get from a point to another point, it is constantly reassessing, where am I, where am I, where am I? And then of course it says, and this is the direction you have to go. These are the roads or the paths you have to follow to get there. So you have, in that case, a combination of the signal, this SMEs, but you also have the visualization. You understand what's going on, and that helps you to navigate. And so if you take those same principles in your business into cybersecurity, like GPS, you're going to have all of these pundits out there, each with their own corner, making their own points and making their own priorities. You, as a business owner, are hearing the signal, but you also have the visibility to see where it is you want to go or where you want to take it. And as a direct result, you're able to not follow every satellite that's broadcasting, but follow the ones that are going to lead you to the point that you're trying to achieve.
Well, and I like that analogy because it really hits at the heart of probably the issue, in that everyone takes their initial signal and then says, I'm in the right location, instead of realizing that their location might move over time. And instead of referring to new signals to let them know that they're on the right track or they're moving where they should be, they refer back to the old, which then may reroute them where they don't need to be.
Right. That's a good point.
One of these things I'm hearing in this conversation is that, assessments are really a heavily used tool to try and do this, but it really matters how you approach the assessment process. Because the assessment can be a weapon of FUD, or the assessment can be a weapon to help give a rational base for what it is they should be fearing in the environment they're living in. And that's connecting back to the owner and the business objectives and the sense of what business decisions are going to be made. And if that's done right, it does actually two things. One is that if somebody's just coming in and doing a FUD dance with them and not connecting to their individual reality, they're not going to be as credible as the person that is. But the other side of it is that if you're making the dots connect and making that kind of GPS decision about you're living in a landscape that changes and you be aware of the business risks of that, then it also makes it easier for them to actually make some prioritized decisions. This is the next thing I need to do, and this is the thing I need to spend the money on, instead of getting vapor locked and saying, I don't know what to choose and I can't make a decision, so I'm not going to make a decision at all.
It's safe to say that business owners would not be able to stay on top of what's going on in cybersecurity. So if you're a small to medium-sized business, you absolutely need a trusted partner, someone like yourself, who is going to say, I know where you are, I understand what you're doing. If I have a gray area, I'm going to ask you about that. But then with that information, I'm an augmentation to your brain to help you to navigate the right decision, because I can dedicate more time to understanding what's going on. And so businesses most definitely have to begin to understand that there's no way they could possibly stay on top of everything that's going on. We're in the industry, we live and breathe on the cutting edge, and it's a real challenge every day to stay on top of what's going on. So if you're running a business or doing anything else but that, it's impossible. So you absolutely have to find a trusted advisor. You absolutely have to work with them, and they can assist you in navigating to whatever is the best answer for yourself.
Agreed.
Well, and it again goes back to everyone working together, right? It reaches the point where, and that's probably part of what the difficulty is that in working together, everyone brings their own ideas of what should be done to the table instead of really addressing what needs to be done. And so it's an interesting approach. I think going back into the assessments conversation, it is a process in which both the business owners and the individuals requesting the assessment to be done and the operators of the assessment need to realize they're not working against each other, but they're in fact working together.
Absolutely. And again, we've been talking a lot about assessments. Sometimes you're in such bad spot, an assessment is superfluous. It's kind of like talking to a fire prevention expert when your house is already on fire. You know what I mean? If you have these big problems, you solve the big problems, and that's most trusted advisors can say, look, man, I've been meaning to tell you this, but your backups are terrible, and if one thing goes wrong, you're out of business. That's something you don't need an assessment for. That's something you just fix.
Well, and more often than not, you would know if they're a trusted advisor because they're telling you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Like, you can't be continuing to go to the same advisor that tells you to eat all the junk food and all the candy, right? You need to be having an advisor that feedbacks and says, well, maybe you need to start munching on some lettuce or something like that, right? Start
Is this
eating,
an intervention?
Yeah, start eating healthy, right? And you can't continue to use that outdated security technology anymore. You need to improve and move on it. And that policy, that very two-ply, paper-thin policy that you've had around security for so long, maybe it's time to make adjustments for. And and in that initial conversation, it could really rub people the wrong way. And people who, if you've been friends before business, right, you may feel like they shouldn't be telling you what you're doing is wrong, but a person who cares is going to say so. So that's part of, I think we have to take those simple social constructs and get back to the basics of it all and realize you as a business owner may get offended in the process, but the purpose of the offense, or the reason that offense is occurring, is because your advisors or those around you can see you're on a path to destruction, and they're trying to make sure that you don't succumb to it.
So this is an intervention.
Yep.
All right. So
personally, I don't know if I can trust somebody that tells me I can't eat cookies, but
amen, brother. Amen.
Yeah. But I think the real question is when we use the words trusted advisor, if you want to get to the core of what trust is, trust means I can speak your language and you can trust that I understand what your real risks are. Mm-hmm. And that's why I keep saying that I think this still comes back to, it really comes down to connecting business outcome and business impact in a tangible way that owner understands. So here's the thing you need to do. Right. Because that's how you get trust.
Is there a way to frame it in, because pretty much every business sees security as just a sunk cost, right? Is there
Oh,
any
yeah.
way instead to begin to frame it as an investment in a healthy, stable future of your company instead of
Well,
just
okay, translate it to another security issue that they already think about. So, for example, their physical building. Do they leave the front door of their building unlocked?
Yeah.
Do they have an alarm system? Why do they make those decisions? Well, because there's things of value inside my building that I want to protect. Well,
Right.
it's the same thing with your network. You know, that's again, it's business language. What's the risk, and understand what the risk is, because that's the problem, is that they don't oftentimes understand enough what the real risk really is. At least in client, you know, as you get smaller businesses that are not technically savvy and don't have IT people on staff, that's absolutely the problem. And so you got to get them to understand what the risk is.
And it's making the untangible, so to speak, very tangible for people, and having a digital, 1 and 0 materialize itself in a physical form, just as you have gravel outside of your business, right? It is security, and the 1s and 0s and the data in your network are just as crucial as, the physical cash you may have in the lockbox in the back office, right? It's just that I think it's so many times. I think now we're starting to see that tectonic shift where businesses are starting to realize security is an investment and is helping safeguard them from the inevitable, because it's not if, but when, right? And it may not be you specifically, but it may be an organization you partner with or you work with, or maybe an organization that you're dependent upon. So then it does become you, because you're part of the impacted entities around that business or that larger organization that was compromised. And so it's starting to make those shifts and those changes. And I don't know how and if we could ever accelerate the process, but I would agree with John in the assessment that people need to look at security as an investment and something that is as crucial to the benefit of their organization as everything else that they have around them, whether that be legal teams, whether that be human resources, whether that be other business and advisors, whatever it might be that is making their physical business tangible and successful. They have to apply that same methodology and understanding to IT and security specifically.
Well, if you're a business owner, try to think about this very salient fact. This is probably the most relevant thing we're going to say to you on this call. If you're a business owner and you get a substantial breach, most businesses, over 60% of them, are out of business within 6 months. So the question is, part of the value translation is, are you comfortable not having any insight or control over the random lottery going on, which one day you may wake up and you are out of business because you lost the lottery? So the question becomes, are you okay with that? And I sincerely hope the answer is no, I'm not okay with that. So then you say, well, I already knew that. I wanted to do something about it. What do I do? The answer is, most businesses are facing an existential threat to their existence, and the problems are not getting better, they're getting worse. The longer you wait, the more risk you're at. You don't get a cold when you have a significant problem, right? Now you get Ebola, AIDS, and die. Like, it's really, really bad. So you have to get ahead of this, or go work for somebody else, because you're not the soldier that survives the war. So we need people who are going to say, I understand the threat that's before me. I understand the predators are out there, and I'm going to do something about that. So, like, for example, we have the darknet, the hackers, the third world countries that are out there trying to come and get our stuff. And they're making a good living for themselves doing that because we're so bad at protecting ourselves. But now we have regulators. So 2020 begins the understanding for American businesses of regulators and what predatory actions they can take upon people. So now there are not just two animals hunting you. Not just one animal hunting you. There are two animals hunting you. So you have to get on top of these things because, again, a regulator could just as easily step in and say, you're not doing all the things you need to do. Here are all your fines, and now you're out of business.
Mhm.
So why would you play Russian roulette with a semiotic pistol, right? You will die, right? So get ahead of that, get on top of that. And because of that, that's your compelling investment reason for why cybersecurity is important and relevant to your business in every way that you can imagine. Probably more so than most other ways.
Marshall, I know you're out there, and you may have a comment or anything you want to add to this. If not, that's totally cool too. Just want to give you an opportunity.
No, great discussion. No, the only thing I could possibly add to the conversation is, security, like any other business process, is a life cycle. It's not a one and done sort of thing. So we've talked a lot about assessments throughout this conversation. Assessments are one part of the life cycle of security, and just like any other business process that has a life cycle, security has a life cycle, and so assessments are one part of that. Testing is another part of that life cycle, and so yeah, that's definitely something to consider when we're talking about these things, that we need to be in the mindset that security is something that we should consider as part of a normal business process and a normal business cycle that we need to consider as something to do, so to keep our businesses healthy and successful.
Thanks, Marshall. So just to kind of wrap this up, because this is team here is going to be who's going to be on these calls, and we'll have different partners that will be joining that have a strong security practice like Turner Technology. So Gary, we appreciate you joining, but I just wanted to take a minute to kind of give who's going to be on this call. So we have John Garner, who is more on the blue team, he's defensive, and Josh Harp, who is on the red team. And both of these guys are in our cyber range. Brett Scott is who's over that and has built this amazing facility that we launched recently that is going to be a great training ground for people. And so you've got two of the guys that are going to be, training people how to become, pen testers, how to teach people how to defend against hacks. So I think there's going to be a lot of information here. And Marshall is a pen tester who's out in the trenches every day as well. So it's a really good team that I think you guys are going to get a lot of information from as we continue on with these calls. So Brett, did you want to say anything about the cyber range just to wrap this up? Because I know we just launched that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jade. So the Tech Data Cyber Range has got 4 main things that we do: training, demonstration, engagement, and then, of course, we have our services team around that. So all of those things help people to get hands-on in understanding the what and the why of cybersecurity. So one of the things that the Tech Data Cyber Range will do to transform the industry, not only are we going to help solve some of the skills gap problems. So if you're a business owner and you're looking for a competent cybersecurity professional, you probably should talk to us, because we get an awful lot of them coming through the cyber range. But secondary to that, there is the how do I understand, how can I see, how can I visualize. If you're a partner, you can help your customers understand what the real impacts would be, except you would happen on our networks with our environment versus potentially knocking your customer out of business. And so it's just a lot of different ways to help people to connect from the ethereal, bad things could happen if you don't do this, to, wow, I need to do this because I've seen what happens if you don't. So that's kind of the point. It's putting the rubber to the road and helping people to understand what's going on in cybersecurity, while simultaneously helping cybersecurity professionals, either new entrants or people who are there, to be better at their jobs and more capable to help you defend your businesses.
And even though that this is a facility that we've built and we've spent 7 figures in building this facility, there is the ability for people to remote in and be able to take advantage of this without actually having to physically be here. So we can always provide more information. If you email securityservices@techdata.com, that will go to a general mailbox, and we can get you the resources to give you information. Gary, did you want to say anything to wrap up? We really appreciate you being on the call and getting your insight. You've 30 years in the industry, tons of background and knowledge and experience. So we really appreciate you being on the call. Gary, you still there? You're on mute.
Sorry, other than the fact you make me feel really old. No, I think this is a really great focus to take this forward with, because as we're looking and having this conversation about security with people, this just magnifies my feeling that it really is about getting them to understand at a business level the risk. They need to rely on a partner to be able to, because we have trouble keeping up. There's no way they can keep up. And so the question is, how do we get them to build that trust? And there are lots of tools that we've talked about in this conversation, but ultimately I think it's about getting them to understand the essential value of the information in their systems and to look at it the way they do the rest of their physical infrastructure in their business. And then I think if you've accomplished that, that I think is half the battle.
Great. Great summary, Gary. Thank you, everybody that's been on the call, and we look forward to next month's call on 30 Minutes with a Hacker. Take care, everybody.